in common. And that mission has sustained us for 48 years. Building on that work begun then, World Wisdoms Project grew out of a desire to broaden the topics being explored to include all the major faith and belief communities. With that came an expanded mission to be a catalyst for change in Northern Colorado. The ability to catalyze our culture is something we possess not only as an organization or a community, but also as individuals. We are gathered today because these intertwined missions have changed each of us in some way. They have become part of us. Later this afternoon, we will invite each of you to create a prayer flag to keep as a reminder of this day. We ask that you direct an intention towards it, a prayer of hope for this community or of the legacy that we leave behind. We hope you will leave assured that our legacy will live on. And a lot of that is about it living on in each person who is gathered here and everyone who has participated in our programs over the years. Theologian in residence, World Wisdoms Project, all of us, we are flags. We are the ones who make the blowing wind visible. Even as we say goodbye to the World Wisdoms Project, the wind of the Spirit continues to blow and bring with it hope and new possibilities. I would like to introduce to you Jim Reid. Jim and Joachim, these met early in the 70s as Jim was assuming the role of Director of Religious Education for John the 23rd Faith Community. Joachim was hired as the theologian in residence for the parish with the hope that his position would invite not only members of that faith community, but also the broader faith community to grow in spiritual maturity. Jim and Joachim celebrated, hopefully, but they collaborated vigorously in that endeavor for over 40 years, not only with the TIR community at John the 23rd, but with the broader Christian community and the World Wisdoms Project community. Jim, we welcome you in a sense as one of the founding fathers, and we look forward to your reflections on this incredible journey. Come on up.
Hello. What?
What's this?
The World Wisdoms thing.
Oh. This is an interesting experience to try to summarize in 5 minutes what's happened over a 40-year period. And it was a really interesting thing to me also this morning. I wrote most of this the last couple of days, and then as my wife and I were getting ready to come, all of a sudden I had this, oh, this is a really easy way to say who Joachim was and his influence was. And so I wrote a couple about 3 or 4 or 5 more sentences at the very end. So I'm just going to do this and we'll see how it goes. Okay. So as Cass mentioned, my name is Jim Reid. I work on the staff at St. John 23rd Catholic University Parish as Director of Religious Education from 1971 to 2014. And it was in 1974 that Joachim became part of our staff at John 23rd, part of that team. And we very quickly became colleagues and friends, and eventually it felt like we were brothers, that we had gone through so many things together. Joachim's wife, Ellen, and Joachim himself were very, very cherished parts of our family, Mary Alice and my family. We had all this history together. Joachim is godfather to our youngest son, and he presided at the weddings of our two children. So there was all of that we knew and experienced together. So now I'll just talk a little bit about Joachim. He was, in 1956, he entered the Trappist community, and most of you maybe be aware of that. It's a monastic, really strict monastic community of men. And he was there for over 20 years. And during that time, he became a priest, and he was also superior of the monastery that's still operational over in Snowmass for about 8 years in the 1960s. Let me say this too. I've copied 3 different handouts that I would invite you to pick up afterwards, and I'll put them somewhere, maybe over here on the table. They're all a page or 2 long, each of them, and they give a lot of information about, I think, maybe in some deeper level than what I'm going to be able to say here too. There's one there that's just the history, his professional history, which is very interesting and important. There's also a couple-page statement that Joachim wrote in 2005. He had attended the Catholic Theological Union Society here in America, and had been there for just 36 hours. But he wrote this just kind of 2-page description of his experience. And that will give you more insights than I could give you about this. I'm going to allude to a couple of those things, and it's in his own words, and it's very, very clear how huge it was for him to be a theologian, and how life-giving it was to him to be a theologian, and to be a teacher, and to be part of this bigger movement that helps all of us in positive ways. So that's, and there's another little piece. There's a woman named Louise Olson, who's a longtime friend and a staff member at John 23rd. And from that time on, Joachim and Ellen were good friends of Louise Olson's, who now lives in Estes Park. And she wrote just a lovely, lovely poem upon Joachim's death that also captures a whole sense of who he was and what he brought to all of us. So I would encourage you to pick those up. They're not that difficult to read. They're very brief, but I think can be very enlightening too about who he was and how he launched in the values that he had, the value he had for the launching of the TIR, and then as that transmuted into world wisdoms. Okay, so Joachim joins the Trappist community in 1956, became a monk and a priest, and during that time there was a couple of years where they sent Joachim to Rome, and he studied a little bit at the North American College in Rome. And then he spent a year in Louvain, which is a really ancient Catholic university in Belgium. And he was in a really big discernment period at that point in his life. He was trying to figure out, even after 20 years, I guess, that, is the monastic community really a good fit for him? And during that stay in Louvain, he discovered that he really was a modern man and wasn't a medieval monk, which the Trappist community wished that all their people were medieval monks, and he didn't fit that identity very well anymore. And he also felt that his kind of core essence was he was a student and he was a teacher. And in some ways, being a monk, and especially a monastic that's very limited, really limits both of those things. And he really wanted the freedom to really become a student and then to be a teacher. So after about 20 years, he left the Trappist community, left the priesthood, and left the monastic community. And eventually he got invited to become theologian in residence at John 23rd, and that happened in 1974. Okay. And sort of the commission that our diocese gave him was this, They wanted a theologian in residence here in Fort Collins because of CSU's presence here. They were trying to reach out to the university communities with Catholic theology, someone who was really professionally trained to do that. So they sent him here to do that mission. And he also joined the staff at John 23rd. So he was really serving Colorado State University and John 23rd, and then just the broader Fort Collins community too. He did things that appealed to all of those audiences. So as I thought about Joachim and what his primary vocation was, in my view anyway, that I really saw him as a servant bridge builder. He had a great gift for studying, understanding. He was a great student, an avid student. Denise is here, longtime secretary of Joachim's. You would know that if you ever entered a room that was his, because it was always filled with books, gigantic libraries and books everywhere, always reading, always studying, always going to new training kinds of things. So he loved to study, and especially anything that had to do with who God is and how that relates to human creation and the physical creation. So he was a very, very avid student. And then he also had this really deep desire to share that information with the wider community. So he's the one that built the bridge between the academic world of theology and the lay world that we were all living in. And it was just to bring the riches of the theological world, which is very much evolving after the Second Vatican Council too. There was just this huge explosion in Catholic theology, and he just loved to be able to bring that to people. And it was a very practical thing for Joachim, because I think his hope was that the information he was sharing would really transform the way people experience their faith and practice their faith and their spirituality. I think this is basically who he was at a very, very deep core level, because studying and teaching gave his life joyful meaning and deep purpose. And that's where our two missions and lives overlapped, was in those same two areas. So where they overlapped, Joachim and myself. Another significant part, if you knew him very well, of Joachim's life was that he loved women, starting first with his wife, Ellen, but also with other women in his life, like Sister Elizabeth Dyer or Denise, who collaborated with him as his secretary for years. And one of the things that I just witnessed over and over again is how those relationships with women were transformative for Joachim, because he basically had grown up in a male-dominated society as a Trappist monk. And his female friends became Joachim's mentors in broadening and enriching his understanding of the essential value that women bring to theology's evolution, and he became a great advocate and champion for including those valuable resources that women bring to the developing theologies and spiritualities. Okay. And I've talked about the 3 handouts, okay? And I don't know, I think I'll just put them on that first table over there when I'm done, and you can, at your leisure, you can go by and pick those up. So this is my final statement, actually, that I wrote just before we came. So Joachim was basically an avid student. He was a voracious reader and who loved to be studying all the time and to learn about God and about God's relationship to creation. He was an equally avid teacher. He loved to share what he learned with others about those two big realities. I shared this rhythm with Joachim so many times. There's so many times we went through this process together. The learning was delightful and stimulating, and the teaching was exhilarating and rewarding, both to him and the people he taught, because he was such an excellent teacher. The preparation to teach, however, was a labor of love, and it was a labor. So many times I participated in that labor with him with a very, very large piece of paper. Whoops. With a very, very large piece of paper, which would receive his understandings and inspirations about a specific topic. The labor was creating a synthesis of all of these understandings, which would make it easy for people to understand, to receive, and to make their own. Thank you.
Jim, thank you so much. And thank you for sharing those resources with us too. What a gift. Let's give it up one more time for Jim. And yeah, so grateful. A large part of the reason that my time with World Wisdom's Project has been of such value to me has been the community that I've met and the people that I have gotten to know. Even though a lot of it was on Zoom, I got to meet like some folks in 3D for the first time today, like Scott. And yeah, so fun to be part of this community. In that way, I'm going to welcome a few women who have been particularly instrumental to me in amidst that. I value mentorship and discipleship and feel like some of these folks have been particularly important to me in that way. So I want to start with welcoming up Linda. Linda was a past president and a long time program chair and has been such a gift to us through her connections with Colorado State University. Go Rams. So I'm going to allow her to share a few reflections on the work that we've done.
So I'm going to share a little bit about program. First, I'd like to thank all of the program chairs and the members of the program committee and the board members of World Wisdoms, past and present, who helped make these events as wonderful as they were. And World Wisdoms Project, like so many other organizations, had to do a quick pivot online, that little COVID issue we had. So there was a great deal of effort that was involved in putting on the program efforts, and many thanks to all of the people who were involved in those programs. I see a former program chair in the back there too, that's good. Second, I'd like to reflect on the wealth of speakers that were part of our programs. By individual speakers, we had over 80 people talk since 2016. And if I went back to 2012, then the number would rise above 100. Granted, a few of those people were repeats. Joachim did talk a number of times, but it's still an amazing number of people willing to be part of an event by an organization that they might never have heard of. You're what? Where are you? But they came. For some of our programs, one might have thought that the individuals to speak on the panel might have been the start of one of those jokes, you know, where three people who didn't have anything in common walked into a bar because the program list was so diverse. And at least one program that I organized, one of the panelists asked me before the program, do the three of us have anything in common? And that was the program on awe, which was a really beautiful program. And by the end of the program, not only did they have something in common, but it resonated with the audience. So I'm glad he stayed. Our speakers came from far across the United States, such as E.J. Dion at Brookings Institute, or Janine Hill Fletcher in New York City, and near from people right here in Fort Collins. Some of you are in the audience here, leaders in our own community. Our speakers came from many walks of life: therapists, religious leaders, hospital chaplains, university professors, organizational leaders, a former monk, executive directors of organizations, an atmospheric scientist, a musicians, economists, theologians, philosopher, a fish ecologist, counselors, and poets. Our speakers were young. Students still polishing off their PhD gave a talk. Mid-career business leaders and professors came and gave talks. And others were well into their careers, being nationally acknowledged experts in their fields. Our events were sometimes academic and sometimes filled with real stories happening right here in Fort Collins, and the Town Hall series co-organized with the Fort Collins Interfaith Council was a really good example. Our themes were diverse. The board would identify topics such as economic inequality through a theological lens, science meets spirituality, theology and science, sharing wisdom through music, story, and art, stories of spiritual journeys, talking spiritual in secular settings, spiritual practice in a time of crisis, one of the more recent programs. No topic was off the table, and we had lots of topics we discussed. Do you have a favorite program? You will be able to revisit that program on the World Wisdom's YouTube website, which will stay live after World Wisdom closes shop. The announcement about how to do that will be in the upcoming newsletters. So stay tuned and visit one of your old programs. I watched one of the programs that was several years old, and I found it to be quite interesting to reflect on, especially the conversation part of the program. So hands off to the speakers who came to our sessions. My last recognition is for people who came to the events. Yes, the board picked out the topics, and the program committee looked far and wide for speakers, made arrangements, made changes at the last minute, and put on the events. The most fascinating aspect, people came. They came because they were interested in topics, wanted to know more about the individual topic, but I think they really came for the conversation, for the opportunity to learn and share with others what that learning meant to them. The conversation was why they came. And you came for the conversation and you stayed. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Cards with that YouTube website that will, YouTube website, is that how we say that? Are on the table. So please be sure to grab one of those. And as Linda said, revisit some of those old programs and favorites, and hopefully some things you haven't seen yet as well. I would like to invite another past president and our longtime treasurer and friend, Helen, to the podium to share some more remarks.
Thank you, Cass. It is so lovely to see everyone here today. I can't tell you how good it feels to see people in person. So thank you for coming. As Cass said, I've been the treasurer for World Wisdom's project for 13 years. I got a lot more practice talking to people about money than I ever dreamed in my whole life. And in the process of that, talking to people about money, I had some incredible conversations with people. Not only or not primarily about money, but again, why were they coming? Why did it matter to them that money was available so the organization could continue? And that is the thing that carries me beyond today. Having said that, there are some groups and some people that I would like to recognize particularly. We basically had three funding sources, I guess I could call it, and those might have been in the form of actual money, but there also were very important contributions in terms of use of space, providing things for programs. Just in the last couple of years, we were recipients of two very substantial grants. One of those came from the Fort Collins Area Interfaith Council, who, beyond, as Linda mentioned, sponsoring the town halls with us, also supported us financially. And I see that we have a member of the Interfaith Council with us today. Is Dave Case? Am I getting the John Case? Darn it, I always do that. I'm so sorry, John Case. And Interfaith Council has been, from the very beginning, incredibly supportive of what it is we try to do. Another organization that supported us significantly from a financial standpoint was the Geller Center. The Geller Center made a significant grant to us to do some programming around intergenerational issues as it pertains to spirituality. That one did not come off as well as we had hoped because it was interrupted by COVID. We were able to do a small thing, but certainly not what we and they had hoped. But nevertheless, they were so committed to the conversation and the topics that we were presenting that they wanted to be a part of that. So I wanted to recognize those in particular. In addition to those, we had lots of sponsors who would make a small grant from an environmental committee, for instance, of the 301 Faith Partners here, made a contribution to a program. We had many people, many organizations who did that. We also had sponsors who gifted us with the use of their space. We have no facility, none, and we have never had a facility. So we have always relied on the generosity of communities in Fort Collins who were committed to what we were doing. I would name immediately First United Methodist Church, Plymouth Congregational, Trinity, 301 Faith Partners. We were continually blessed with organizations who said, we see what you're doing and we think it's important. And so here's like how we'd like to help. In addition to those kinds of things, many of those organizations also provided us with board members. And so we had lots of input from a lot of different communities in Fort Collins. And again, that really contributed to who we were and what we were able to do. We had individuals who responded in all kinds of ways. We had people who made one-time donations that were significant. We had people who were committed to us over the long term, either by making an annual contribution. We had people who were giving to us monthly. And there were also people who had never heard of us before, but for some reason, based on the topic, whether it was awe or whether it was the town hall, said, this was wonderful and I want to help you. And so they made a contribution. Or they showed up and helped set up chairs or put out refreshments or whatever. And the gratitude that I feel to be part of that is something I will never forget. So, thank you.